6 months had passed since the Hollow retreated into the depths of Tessar 4. The entity had not been destroyed. The Arhan Wu Kang theorized that something so ancient and vast could not be killed by any force the galaxy possessed. But it had withdrawn, confused and diminished, to sleep in the darkness until it could understand what it had encountered. The humans stayed to help rebuild. They always did. Yanseo had watched them work alongside the colonists for weeks, sharing meals and teaching songs and learning names. Never asking for payment, never demanding recognition. Just doing what needed to be done because someone had to do it. It should not have surprised her anymore, but somehow it still did. Administrator Yanseo. The official summons read: You are required to appear before the Galactic Council to answer for your role in the unauthorized activation of the human emergency line. Director Taejin had received the same summons. They traveled to the council station together, neither speaking of what waited for them. The punishment for violating the exclusion protocols ranged from demotion to imprisonment, depending on the severity of the breach and the disposition of the judges. Activating Channel 0 after 30 years of silence would certainly qualify as severe. Council chamber was vast and ancient, filled with representatives from species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. Their faces unreadable as Yumseo and Taejin took their places before the judgment. Platform Ambassador J1 presided over the proceedings, his ceremonial robes immaculate, his expression carved from stone. Director Taejin, Administrator Yumseo. You stand accused of violating 17 protocols governing contact with the human species. How you respond? We do not deny our actions, Taejin said. We activated Channel 0 with full knowledge of the consequences. You were aware that such contact was forbidden. We were aware that 5,000 people would die if we followed the protocols. The Council fleet would have arrived. The Council fleet would have arrived in time to quarantine a dead colony. Yanseo interrupted, her voice steady despite the fear that churned in her stomach. We had watched the Hollow consume half the population in less than a day. Waiting for the fleet would have meant waiting for everyone to die. You exceeded your authority. We exercised our judgment. Your judgment is not relevant. The protocols exist precisely to prevent individuals from making decisions that affect the entire galaxy. And those protocols would have killed everyone on Tessar 4. Aye. Murmur ran through the chamber. Before J1 could respond, the doors at the far end of the room opened and a figure walked in uninvited. Captain Suyeon Park moved through the chamber with the same calm purpose she brought to everything. Her uniform crisp, her expression pleasant, her presence somehow filling the vast space in ways that had nothing to do with physical size. Forgive the intrusion, she said, but I believe I have relevant information for these proceedings. This is a closed session, J1 said coldly. Humans have no standing before the council. Then consider me a witness for the defense. She did not wait for permission. In the 6 months since Tessar 4, the Human Rapid Response Corps has received 17 requests for contact from species across the galaxy. Not distress calls, just requests. Requests from people who watched what happened on that colony and wondered why they were forbidden to know us. The protocols were written because you feared what humans would do to your cultures. Park said, you were afraid we would change you, make you dependent, corrupt your values with our strange ideas about sacrifice and connection. Those concerns remain valid, do they? Look at what actually happened on Tessar 4. We did not conquer the colony. We did not install human governors or demand trade agreements. We helped them rebuild and then we left. You left personnel behind, volunteers, colonists who chose to join us. Is choice not the foundation of your entire governmental philosophy? J1's composure cracked slightly. You do not understand the danger you represent. I understand it perfectly. Humans are dangerous because we care too much. We form attachments too easily. We remember names and birthdays and promises made in difficult times. We are dangerous because once we know someone, we cannot simply forget them. Park turned to face the assembled council. You built the exclusion protocols because 30 years ago, humans helped you through a crisis and then refused to pretend it never happened. We stayed in touch, we visited, we invited you to our worlds. And that terrified you. It disrupted centuries of careful cultural development. It gave you friends. The word hung in the air. You have allies, Park continued. You have trading partners and diplomatic relations and carefully negotiated treaties. But before the humans came, how many of you had friends? How many of you knew what it felt like to have someone remember your birthday? She let the question sit for a moment. The civilization that carved those warnings on Tezar 4 understood something your protocols have forgotten. Isolation is not protection. Isolation is the first step toward the hollow, toward surrendering your individuality because you have forgotten why it matters. Ambassador J1 rose from his seat. For a long moment, he simply stood there, ancient and tired, the weight of 30 years of fear visible in every line of his face. I wrote those protocols, he said finally. I wrote them because I watched humans save my world and then refused to leave us alone. I watched them care about us in ways no other species ever had, and it terrified me. Why? Because I did not know how to care back. Because my entire career had been built on maintaining distance and objectivity and control. And suddenly there were beings who made me want to be different. His voice cracked. I sealed Channel 0 because I was afraid of becoming someone I did not recognize. And in doing so, I nearly condemned 5,000 people to death. He turned to Yunseo and Taejin. You broke the protocols because you understood something I had forgotten. That rules exist to serve people, not the other way around. Ambassador, the charges are dismissed. A shocked silence fell over the chamber. Furthermore, J1 continued, his voice growing stronger. I moved to amend the human exclusion protocols. Contact with the human species shall be permitted in cases of existential emergency. How do we define existential emergency? Someone Aske J1 looked at Captain Park. We leave the definition deliberately vague. The vote was not unanimous, but it passed. Yunseo walked out of the council chamber 3 hours later. Still not quite believing what had happened, Captain Park fell into step beside her. That was quite a performance. Yunseo said, it was not a performance. It was the truth. How did you know they would listen? I did not, but I have learned that people usually want to be better than their fears allow. Sometimes they just need someone to show them it is possible. They walked in silence for a moment. What happens now? Yunseo asked. Now we go back to answering calls. Now we keep helping anyone who asks. Now we do the only thing humans have ever been good at. Why is that? Making it impossible to forget that connection matters. Park stopped and turned to face her. Actually, I have a question for you. Yes? Hana joined the response corps last month. She was training to be one of the people who answers calls. And she mentioned that she learned courage from a young administrator who broke every rule to save strangers she had never met. Yunseo felt heat rise to her cheeks. I was just doing what needed to be done. That is exactly what I mean. Park pulled a small device from her pocket and held it out. This is a direct link to the persistent hope. You will receive every call we receive, every request for help, every voice crying out in the darkness. Why give this to me? Because Channel 0 is not sealed anymore. And someone needs to teach the galaxy how to answer. Yunseo took the device. It was warm in her hand, humming with the distant signals of 1,000 worlds. I do not know if I am ready for this. No one ever is, Park said. But you pressed the button when it mattered. And that tells me everything I need to know. She turned and walked away, leaving Yunseo alone with the weight of a galaxy in her palm that night. Back on Station Verith 9. Yumzeo sat at her console and looked at Channel 0. The seals were gone, the warnings were gone. In their place was a simple message. Blinking softly in the darkness, connection active. She thought about the hollow sleeping beneath Tessara 4. Waiting to wake again, she thought about the council slowly. Learning to trust, she thought about Hana and Captain Park and Director Taejin, and all the beings across the galaxy who had spent so long being afraid of caring too much. Then she opened the channel and began to listen. Somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, a voice was calling for help, and this time, someone would answer. Captain Soo-yeon Park stood on the bridge of the persistent hope and watched her people walk into the heart of darkness without weapons. This was not the first time she had ordered such a mission. It would not be the last. Dr. Kang, what are we seeing from the ground teams? The xenopsychologist worked his console with the focus of someone who had long ago learned to set aside fear in favor of curiosity. The entity is confused. Captain, it continues to offer absorption, but it cannot process the responses it is receiving. Explain. When most beings encounter the hollow, they feel loneliness first. The entity amplifies that feeling and then offers connection as a cure. But our teams are not responding to loneliness with desperation. They are responding with purpose. Exactly. Sergeant Moonsteam is broadcasting emotional content throughout the colony, music, messages, recordings that remind the colonists why their individual existence matters. Captain Park nodded. And the colonists? 3 have walked back out of the absorption zones in the past 20 minutes. 2 more are resisting integration, despite being partially consumed. It can be reversed. It appears so. The hollow takes minds that want to be taken. If we can give them a reason to want something else. An alert flashed across the main display. A direct communication request from within the entity itself. The hollow wanted to speak. Park accepted the connection without hesitation. Captain Park, the voice said, echoing through every speaker on the bridge simultaneously. You are an unusual being. I get that a lot. Your kind confuses me. You approach without fear and without desire to join. You acknowledge my offer and refuse politely. This is not how civilizations respond to me. We are not a typical civilization. No, you are not. There was something like frustration in the hollow's voice. Ancient and vast, but somehow familiar. I have consumed thousands of species across millions of years. Beings far more advanced than your own. Beings who built empires that spanned galaxies. All of them came to me eventually. All of them recognized the truth of what I offer. And what truth is that? That separation is suffering. That individuality is loneliness. That the only peace is unity. Captain Park leaned forward in her chair. May I ask you something? The question seemed to surprise the entity. Proceed. Do you remember them? The beings you have absorbed? Silence stretched across the connection. I am them, we are one. There is no separation between. That is not what I asked. I asked if you remember them, their names, their stories, the things they loved and feared and hoped for. Such things are irrelevant in unity. They are the only things that matter in individuality. Park stood and walked toward the main display, where the dark mass of the hollow pulsed beneath the colony's surface. You offer an end to loneliness. But loneliness is the price we pay for being someone. If I merge with everyone else, I am no longer Soo-yeon Park. I am no longer the person my daughter writes letters to. I am no longer the friend who remembers birthdays. I am nothing. You are everything. Everything is the same as nothing when you cannot tell the difference. The hollow went quiet for a long moment. Your daughter writes to you every week. She tells me about her studies and her friends and the meals she has learned to cook. She asks when I am coming home. And you leave her to rescue strangers. Yes. Why? This causes you pain. I can feel it in you. The The guilt and the longing and the fear that you will never return. It does. Then why do you not stay with her? Why do you choose suffering? Captain Park smiled, and there were tears in her eyes. Because if I stay safe while others are in danger, I would not be the person my daughter loves. She loves a mother who helps people. And I love being that mother, even though it hurts, especially because it hurts. The pain proves it matters. Deep in the colony, Sergeant Moon's team reached the lower excavation levels where Hana had been trapped for hours. The young colonist emerged from her hiding place with tears streaming down her face. Not from fear, but from something else entirely. You came, she said. Of course we came, but you do not know me. I am no one important, just a mining technician who happened to survive. Moon knelt beside her, his weathered face softening. Hana, I want you to understand something. You pressed a button and sent a message, and that message traveled across the galaxy to people who have never seen your face. Yes, and they dropped everything they were doing. Left their families, risked their lives, flew faster than physics should allow. All because you asked for help. Why? Why would anyone do that? Because that is what humans do. And you know what? What? It is what you did too. You found those carvings. You transmitted the information that gave us a chance. You could have stayed hidden. You could have given up. But you chose to help. Hana stared at him. I did not think of it that way. Most people never do. They think heroism is about strength and power and winning. But heroism is just choosing to matter to someone else when it would be easier not to. Above them. The Hollow continued its conversation with Captain Park. I do not understand your species, the entity said. You are small and fragile, and your lives are impossibly brief. You should be the easiest to absorb. Yet, you resist in ways no one else has. Would you like to know why? Yes, because we grew up alone. Explain. Humans evolved on a planet with no other intelligent life. No galactic community, no ancient wisdom, no one to help us or guide us or save us from ourselves. We had only each other. Park's voice softened. We learned very early that survival meant choosing to care about strangers. The human who helped a neighboring tribe during famine was not weakening their own group. They were strengthening the bonds that would save everyone when disaster came for them. Irrational sacrifice. Rational investment in connection. The civilization that carved those warnings understood this. They could not be absorbed because they knew something you have forgotten. What? That loneliness is not the absence of others. Loneliness is the absence of meaning. And meaning comes from choosing to matter to someone beyond yourself. The Hollow was silent for a very long time then. Throughout the colony, the darkness began to recede. Not quickly, not completely, but enough, one by one. The absorbed colonists emerged from the entity's embrace. Their minds still their own, their memories intact, their loneliness unchanged, but no longer unbearable, because now they knew they were not alone. Now they knew someone had come for them. Hana walked out of the excavation levels with Sergeant Moon beside her. And the first thing she saw was the persistent hope hovering above the colony like a promise. Will it come back? She asked. The Hollow? Probably, someday. Entities like that do not die easily. Then what was the point? If it will just return. The point, Moon said gently, is that when it does return, you will remember this day. You will remember that someone answered when you called. And that memory will make you stronger than any weapon we could leave behind. Hana looked up at the ship. I want to do what you do. What is that? I want to answer the calls, Moon smiled. Then you already are. The human rapid response Corps vessel, Persistent Hope, dropped out of faster-than-light travel 3 hours after the call went out. 3 hours. The Council fleet was still 15 hours away. Crawling through space at speeds the regulations deemed safe and appropriate. The humans had arrived in a fraction of that time. That should not be possible, Yanisio said. Staring at her sensor readouts, the distance alone would require at least 12 hours at maximum velocity. Humans have different definitions of maximum, Director Taejin replied. Though even he seemed shaken by the speed of the response, the Persistent Hope was not a warship in any traditional sense. Its hull was covered in communication arrays and medical bays and cargo holds filled with supplies rather than weapons. But something about its approach made Yunseo think of predators who had learned to hunt without claws. A signal came through from the vessel, and a face appeared on the main display. The human was female, with dark hair pulled back from a face that showed the lines of someone who smiled often and worried more. Her uniform bore the insignia of a captain, but her eyes held something that rank alone could not explain. "This is Captain Soo-yeon Park of the Persistent Hope," she said. "We received your distress call, and we are here to help." "Captain Park, I am Director Taejin of Station Verith 9. I must inform you that by accepting your assistance, we are in violation of 17 Council protocols and—" "Director," Captain Park interrupted gently. "Someone called for help. That is all that matters. Please tell us what we are facing." Yuseo transmitted the compiled data on the holo, watching the human captain's face as she absorbed information about an entity that consumed minds and offered false unity to anyone who listened. Captain Park did not flinch. She did not show fear. She simply nodded, as if the impossible were merely another problem to solve. "We are reading approximately 3,000 life signs still active in the colony," Park said. "Down from the original 5,000. The absorbed are not dead," Yunseo explained. "They simply become part of the holo. We do not know if they can be recovered. Then we will have to find out." "Captain, you do not understand. The entity cannot be fought with conventional weapons. Energy attacks feed it. Physical barriers dissolve before it. We have no way to. We are not planning to fight it." Yunseo blinked. "I do not understand." Captain Park smiled, and there was something in that smile that made Yunseo think of sunrise after a long night. "The data you transmitted included the carvings found by a survivor named Hana. Irrational sacrifice. Beings who could not be absorbed because they valued others more than themselves." "Yes, but we do not know what that means." "We do." The captain turned to address someone off-screen, issuing orders in a language Yunseo did not recognize, but somehow understood anyway. "Dr. Hyan Wu Kang will be coordinating our approach from a psychological perspective," Park said. "Sergeant Ji-hoon Moon will lead the ground team, and I will be handling direct communication with the entity." "Communication? You intend to speak with it?" "Everything that thinks can be reasoned with, Director. Even things that think very differently than we do. The holo does not reason. It absorbs. Then we will give it something it cannot absorb." Before Yunseo could ask what that meant, the Persistent Hope began broadcasting on all frequencies. Not a warning, not a threat, but an introduction. "Attention to SAR 4. This is the Human Rapid Response Course. We have come because you asked for help. We are not here to study you or quarantine you or observe your destruction from a safe distance." The message echoed across every channel the colony could receive. "We are here because someone pressed a button and asked for help, and we will never ignore that call, no matter how long it has been since we last spoke." Yunseo watched her sensor readings as the Persistent Hope moved into orbit above the colony, deploying smaller craft that descended toward the surface with no hesitation, no caution, no apparent concern for their own safety. "They are sending people into the colony," she said, "directly into the area controlled by the holo. Yes, they will be absorbed. Perhaps, how can you be so calm about this?" Director Taejin turned to face her, and for the first time since she had known him, he looked at peace. "Because I have seen what humans do when someone needs help, and I have learned to trust in things I do not understand, on the surface of Tessar 4. Sergeant Ji-hoon Moon led his team into the darkness. They did not carry weapons. They carried speakers and screens and recording devices filled with messages from across the galaxy. Letters from family members, songs from distant worlds, stories of love and loss and hope that had been collected over decades of human service to anyone who asked. "Remember your training," Moon said to his team. "We are not here to fight the Hollow. We are here to give people a reason to fight for themselves." They moved through corridors that pulsed with shadow, past walls that whispered promises of belonging, toward the center of the colony where thousands of minds had already surrendered to the embrace of something that called itself unity. The Hollow noticed them immediately. It did not attack it. Invited. "You are tired," the voice in their mind said. "You have carried burdens for so long. Let me carry them for you. Let me give you peace." Sergeant Moon smiled. "Thanks for the offer. But we prefer our burdens." The Hollow paused, confused by response that did not fit any pattern it had encountered in millennia of consuming civilizations. "You resist. Why?" "I offer everything you have ever wanted: connection, belonging, an end to the loneliness that haunts your species." "You offer absorption," Moon said. "We offer something better." He activated the first speaker, and music filled the corridor. It was a simple melody, a lullaby from Earth that parents had sung to children for generations, promising that morning would come and that someone would always be waiting. The Hollow recoiled, not from pain, from confusion. "What is this?" "This is what we fight for," Moon said. "Not survival, not power. This," he played a recording of a child laughing, then a message from a parent to a lost son, then a love letter written by someone who knew they were dying. "Every person in this colony has someone who misses them," Moon said, "someone who is waiting for them to come home. And we are going to remind them of that." The Hollow pressed against his mind, searching for weakness, searching for the loneliness that existed in every thinking being. It found something it had never encountered. Ji-hoon Moon was lonely sometimes. Yes, he missed his family. Yes, he carried grief and regret and the weight of too many battles fought in too many places. But deeper than all of that, deeper than the pain and the loss and the exhaustion, there was something else. There was purpose. There was the unshakable certainty that his life had meaning because he gave it to others, that his loneliness was worth enduring because it meant he could ease the loneliness of strangers. The Hollow could not absorb what it could not understand, and it had never understood why anyone would choose pain for the sake of people they had never met. Impossible. It whispered. "No," Moon replied. "Just human." Deep in the colony, a woman named Hana heard the music echoing through the darkness, and for the first time since the Hollow had awakened, she began to believe she might survive, not because someone was coming to rescue her, but because someone had come to remind her why she was worth rescuing. The transmissions from Tessar 4 grew worse with every passing hour. Shinseio had stopped counting the distress calls after the first 100, each one more desperate than the last, each one painting a picture of something that defied everything she understood about threats and survival. This was not an invasion. This was not a weapon. This was something far more terrible. "Energy barriers have failed," Supervisor Minjun reported, his voice cracking through the speakers like broken glass. "We redirected full power from the fusion cores, and the entity simply absorbed it. The barriers did not slow it down, they fed it." "Have you attempted kinetic countermeasures?" Director Taejian asked. "We fired everything we had. Plasma charges, rail projectiles, sonic disruptors. Nothing works. The entity does not fight back because it does not need to fight back." "What do you mean?" A long pause filled the communication channel. "Our people are walking into it willingly," Minjun said. "It calls to them and they go, smiling, peaceful, as if they are returning home after a long journey. Zuncio felt cold spread through her chest. How many have you lost? 300 in the first hour, another 200 since then. The evacuation ships cannot launch because the entity has grown into the landing systems. Grown? It spreads like living shadow, Director. It moves through walls and floors and air itself, and wherever it touches, it invites. Invites what? Unity, Minjun whispered. It promises an end to loneliness, an end to fear, an end to the exhausting work of being separate. The transmission cut to static for a moment before returning. I have sealed myself in the command center with 37 survivors. We have perhaps 6 hours before it reaches us here. The Council fleet is en route, Taejin said. Estimated arrival in 18 hours. 18 hours. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. We will not last 18 hours. Director. The transmission ended and CO stared at her console as new reports flooded in from the colony. Automated systems documenting the spread of the entity through every level and corridor and chamber of Tesara 4. The data told a story that made no sense. Life signs were not terminating. They were simply vanishing. People were not dying inside the entity. They were becoming part of it. I do not understand, she said. If it is not killing them, what is it doing? Director Taejin stood beside her with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the colony schematics slowly fill with spreading darkness. There are old stories, he said quietly, from before the Council unified the galaxy. Stories of entities that existed between stars, feeding not on matter or energy but on consciousness itself. You think this is one of those entities? I think we have awakened something that was buried for a reason. A new signal cut through the ambient noise of the hub, weaker than the others, originating from deep within the colony where the mining operations had first breached into something ancient. This is Hana, a young voice said. I am trapped in the lower excavation levels. I found something you need to see. Yuncio traced the signal and pulled up visual feed from the caller's environmental suit. The image showed a cavern wall covered in carvings that predated any known civilization. These markings are everywhere down here, Hana continued. I think the people who made them were trying to warn us. Can you translate them? Some of them, the language is old, but it shares roots with Tesari script. Hana's camera panned across the wall, revealing image after image of figures walking toward a great darkness. Their faces peaceful, their hands outstretched. They called it the Hollow, Hana said. It came to their world and offered them belonging, offered them unity, offered them an end to the pain of being alone. What happened to them? They accepted, all of them. An entire civilization walked into the Hollow and became part of it. The camera stopped on a final carving, larger than the others, showing a small group of figures standing apart from the rest. But these ones refused, Hana said. The carvings say they possessed something the Hollow could not understand, something that made them immune to its call. What was it? The translation is difficult, but the closest meaning would be irrational sacrifice. I do not understand. Neither did the Hollow. These beings died for strangers. They gave everything for people they had never met and would never see again. And the Hollow could not absorb minds it could not comprehend. Director Taejin went very still beside Yunsei. Are you saying the entity can be defeated? I am saying it was defeated before, Hana said, by beings who made no logical sense. Beings who valued others more than themselves. The transmission wavered as something groaned in the depths of the colony. The Hollow is close now, Hana said. I can hear it in my mind. Whispering, promising, but I will not go to it. I will not. The signal dissolved into status. Yuncio worked frantically at her console, trying to re-establish contact. But the lower levels had gone dark. Council Fleet Command is requesting an update, another officer reported. They want to know if the situation has changed. Tell them the entity is spreading faster than projected. Taejin said. They are asking about direct engagement protocols. What are they saying? They are saying the fleet will establish a quarantine perimeter upon arrival. No direct engagement until the entity has been fully studied and analyzed. Yoon Seo spun in her chair. Studied? There will be nothing left to study. The entire colony will be absorbed by then. Those are the protocols. Administrator, the protocols are going to kill 5,000 people. The protocols exist to prevent greater losses. She turned to Director Taejin. There must be something we can do. The old Corval stood motionless, his eyes fixed on something only he could see. Hana spoke of a rational sacrifice, he said slowly. Of beings who died for strangers they would never meet? Yes, beings. The Hollow could not comprehend. Yes, I know such beings. His gaze shifted to Channel Zero. We all do. Yoon Seo felt her heart stop for a single terrible moment. The protocols forbid it. The protocols were written by people who were afraid of change, Taejin said. And right now, I am far more afraid of what happens if we do nothing. He walked toward the sealed channel with steps that seemed to age him with every stride. Director, you cannot. The council will do what the council always does, he said. They will study and analyze and debate while people die. And I am too old and too tired to watch that happen again. He turned to face her. But I cannot do this alone. The channel requires 2 authorization codes to unlock. Yasuo looked at the console, looked at the spreading darkness consuming Tessar 4, looked at the face of a man who had carried his guilt for 30 years. If we do this, she said, there is no going back. No, Director Taejin agreed. There never is. She rose from her chair and walked to stand beside him together. They reached for the sealed channel together. They entered their codes. The 17 warning seals dissolved one by one. And Channel Zero opened for the first time in 3 decades. A voice answered before the signal had finished connecting, as if someone had been waiting beside the receiver for exactly this moment. This is the Human Rapid Response Course, the voice said. Warm and steady and impossibly calm. Tell us everything. Yoon Seo had cataloged emergency beacon frequencies for 3 years. And in all that time, she had never touched Channel Zero. The channel sat at the top of her console, like a wound that refused to heal, wrapped in 17 digital seals that pulsed with soft red warning light. Whenever her cursor drifted too close, she knew what lay behind those seals. Everyone on Station Verith 9 knew the human emergency line. Her fingers moved across safer frequencies as she processed the morning reports, logging distress calls from cargo vessels and mining operations and the occasional lost passenger transport that had wandered too far from established routes. These were problems she could solve with a few keystrokes and a dispatched rescue team. These were problems that fit neatly into the protocols the Galactic Council had established centuries before her birth. But Channel Zero was different. Channel Zero was forbidden. You are staring at it again, Director Taejin said from the doorway of the communications hub. Yoon Seo pulled her gaze away from the sealed channel and straightened in her seat, feeling heat rise to the pale blue skin of her cheeks. I was simply reviewing the frequency allocations, Director. You were wondering why we keep a channel we are forbidden to use. She did not deny it. Taejin walked into the hub with the slow, careful movements of someone who had carried heavy burdens for too long, his silver-streaked fur catching the light from the display screens that lined every wall. He had commanded Verith 9 for 40 years, longer than Yoon Seo had been alive, and the weight of those years showed in the way his shoulders curved forward as if bracing against an invisible wind. I was young once, he said, stopping beside her console, and I asked the same questions you are asking now. What answers did you find? None that brought me peace, Before Yunseo could press further, the main doors slid open and Ambassador J1 swept into the hub with the confident stride of someone who had never doubted his own importance. His ceremonial robes whispered against the floor as he moved, and his four eyes scanned the room with barely concealed disdain. "Director Taejin," he said, "I trust the station is prepared for my inspection. We are always prepared." "Ambassador." And the sealed channels remained sealed. It was not a question. They do. J1's gaze drifted to Yunseo, and something cold moved behind his eyes. "You are the young administrator who requested access to the historical archives regarding the human exclusion protocols." Yunseo felt her throat tighten. "I was curious about the reasoning behind the restrictions." "Ambassador, curiosity is a luxury we cannot afford when it comes to humans. But surely understanding the threat would help us." "Threat?" J1 laughed, but there was no warmth in the sound. "You misunderstand, child. The humans are not our enemies. Then why are we forbidden to contact them?" The ambassador moved closer, and Yunseo noticed for the first time how tired he looked beneath his carefully maintained composure. "Because they are too effective," he said softly. "When humans intervene, they do not simply solve problems and depart. They form bonds, they return, they change everything they touch. Is change so terrible? Change is chaos, and chaos cannot be controlled." He gestured toward the sealed channel with one long finger. 30 years ago, a plague swept through the Vareth system and we called the humans for help. They came within hours, not days, hours. And they brought medicines and doctors and engineers who worked without sleep until the plague was contained. "That sounds like a good thing," Yunseo said. "It was. And that was precisely the problem." Taejin shifted beside her, his expression unreadable. "What the ambassador means," the director said quietly, "is that the humans did not leave when the plague ended. They built hospitals," J1 continued. "They established exchange programs. They taught our children games and songs and ideas we had never encountered. Within 5 years, 3 species in this sector had requested permanent human cultural advisors. And the council found this threatening? The council found it uncontrollable," J1 said. "Humans do not understand boundaries. They see suffering and they act. They see loneliness and they reach out. They see walls and they build doors." He turned away from the console. "We did not forbid contact with humans because they might harm us. We forbade it because they might help us, and we might never be the same again." The ambassador departed without another word, leaving Yunseo alone with Director Taejin and the soft pulse of the sealed channel. "Is it true?" she asked. "Everything he said?" Taejin was quiet for a long moment. "I was a junior officer when the plague came," he finally said. "I watched my crew dying around me. And I watched the humans work themselves to exhaustion saving people they had never met and would never see again. Why would anyone do that?" I asked one of them that same question, a human doctor who had not slept in 4 days. What did she say? She said it was because we had asked for help. And asking for help was the bravest thing anyone could do. And bravery deserved to be honored. His eyes met hers. I never forgot those words. And neither did the council. That is why they sealed the channel. Not because humans are dangerous, but because they make us want to be like them. An alarm cut through the hub before Yunseo could respond her. Console lit up with an incoming distress signal. Priority level 7 from a mining colony designated Tesar 4. Standard emergency, she said, her training taking over as she processed the data. Mining accident in the lower levels. Requesting medical support and evacuation assistance. Dispatch the nearest response team. Taejin ordered, already done. But as she worked the console, the signal changed. The voice coming through the speakers shifted from controlled urgency to something that sounded very much like terror. "This is Supervisor Min Jun of Tesara 4. Please amend our previous report. This is not a mining accident. Repeat. This is not a mining accident. Tessara 4. Please clarify the nature of your emergency. Something has awakened in the deep shafts. We do not know what it is, but it is spreading. Our people are walking into it willingly. They are smiling as they disappear. The transmission crackled with interference. It is in their minds. Menjun whispered. It is calling to them. And they cannot resist. The signal dissolved into status. Yunseo looked at Director Taejin and saw something she had never seen before in his ancient eyes. Fear. Contact the Council fleet, he said. Tell them we have a priority 1 situation. And the humans? Taejin stared at Channel 0 for a long moment before turning away. The protocols are clear. Administrator, we handle our own problems. But as Yunseo began transmitting to the Council fleet, she could not shake the feeling that their own problems had just grown beyond anything they could handle alone. And the sealed channel pulsed softly in the corner of her vision, like a heart waiting to beat again.